everyone, and welcome to another edition of Ask Anything presented by Moser Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Moser's Director of Personnel. We're happy that you could join us for this episode of Ask Anything because today we're talking with two of Moser Consulting's summer interns, Ethan Murphy and Adam Lowder, about AI's effect in the classroom. Ethan Murphy is a rising junior at Purdue University studying finance with a concentration in leadership. He spends most of his time invested in extracurricular activities such as the Larsen Leaders Academy on campus, where he is the vice president of data analytics. He offers a unique experience with AI, having competed in a case competition as the main driver being generative AI, along with utilizing AI in the classroom. Adam Lowder is a senior at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business in Indianapolis, studying supply chain management and international business. He's a dedicated worker and problem solver with an entrepreneurial spirit. He's a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, a certification that signifies expertise in the Lean Six Sigma methodology. This approach focuses on improving efficiency and quality in supply chain operations through data-driven decision-making and process optimization. Adam has been working as a business operations analyst for the summer here at Moser Consulting. You guys obviously have been interns for us this past summer. I want to ask before we get into the topic, how has your experience been so far?
So far, I've really loved working here at Moser. I've learned a lot. I've been able to meet some really great people and do some really good things on my contract. So I've been very happy with how everything has been.
It's been definitely a privilege and an opportunity that I've really liked. Do not have really any regrets at all. Like I've had a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun being on team meetings with people from, all across the nation. It's definitely been a wake-up call for me, with like virtual work. So definitely a unique perspective that I didn't think I'd be doing this summer, but I really like it.
And you guys have been pretty much client facing, right, for the most part of the summer, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about AI. We've talked about AI, I feel, a lot in the last season of Ask Anything. This year, we've talked a lot about it, and we're going to talk some more. So hopefully you're not bored about it, because this is a very interesting topic. I really like it. But we're going to hit this topic a little bit different today because we're going to be talking about how it might affect the classroom. I'm not going to lie, I have a 21-year-old son, so kind of similar to where you guys are at. He goes to college, he's studying, he's doing his own thing, and we've already had a talk about AI and what to do and what not to do with AI, right? When studying. So let's talk a little bit about that. In what ways do you foresee AI personalizing the learning experience for students in diverse classroom settings? Like, where do you see this going?
I see it being a resource more as a tool than anything. I don't think anyone should rely on AI to be your main driving aspect and like you get all your answers from that. I think you should still put in a lot of your organic original work. But I think if you have to clean it down or you have to make a more concise answer and save time, I don't think AI is a bad tool at all from an education, like educator standpoint or student standpoint. They can use it a lot, which I think students use it a lot, but educators might be more afraid of it. But I do think there's optimization there to be had.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the teachers are pretty. I'm not sure if it would be afraid, but they're not really sure what to do with it right now. A lot of the students, I don't think, know how to use it well. I think a lot of people just think they can just put a prompt into ChatGPT and get a really good paper or something out of it. And right now it's not really good for that. Like I've always said this about AI when it comes to like assignments and things like that. It can write you a C paper. It can write a paper that gives you a C, C minus, D plus. It's missing the human element. It's missing the next step.
Right.
That's the problem where it's at right now. So people would need to learn how to use it as a tool. It's definitely just a tool to help you write, but it can get you on the right path to creating something creative. But if you just turn in the assignment as is, you're going to get something that's very bland and that's missing that key human thing where you take the information and summarize it and make some sort of inference with it. Right now, it's missing that. So, as a tool, it can be a great thing and probably should be utilized by teachers more in the future. I think they should figure out a way to utilize that, but at its very moment, it is just a tool.
I agree with that because, truth be told, I've used it for that same reason, just as a creative jumper into where I want to get to with something that I'm writing. But I think you're right, Adam, in saying that if you want to turn that in, that's definitely going to be either an average or below average score for you, because it's not going to be great. It's going to be average at
Also,
best.
probably pretty easily identifiable at
Right.
this point as having
Yeah.
been generated by AI, but for nuance
Yes, that's
and
where I was going.
insight, you
That-
still need the human factor.
That's the difference that we provide, is that when writing something, like I went to school several years ago, and I was writing psychology papers. Back then we didn't have the tools, so all that we had was basically our intellect and what we were reading for books and journal articles on the internet. So we had to infer, we had to put in those nuances, those subtleties that we then read and interpreted in our own words, and then try to create this new idea. Whereas this now is taking all this data out of a prompt and kind of just, here's what might sound the best. And if you're a student, you read that. If you want to be a C average student, then go ahead, submit it, and we'll see what happens down the road when teachers get to the point of reading it and, like you said, Brian, just reviewing it, and then it's sounding like, wait, you doesn't sound like you wrote this.
Yeah. Does that technically, would that meet like an academic definition of plagiarism?
Yeah, I mean, maybe like a gen ed that's kind of like a throw off class. Besides that, but any class that has like rigor, they have any AI like software that tracks that. Like they'll have any turn in box that you send a paper through, it'll run
It's
for
gonna screen it.
AI and it screens it. Yeah.
That was good.
And you'll instantly be, most of the time, just like failed on the paper, and then maybe like
I was gonna say,
it's
because
just very sloppy. Yeah.
the
it's not-
last time I was in school was close to 10 years ago when I was doing my master's, and we had a thing back then, which I know it still exists, turn it in.
Turnitin.com. Yeah.
Yeah, it still exists. So I'm assuming it's evolved with the times and with this technology. Obviously, I haven't been keeping up with it because I'm not in college anymore.
It integrates better now, so they're
Yeah.
able to like attach it to really anything that has a submission box.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so they used to have to manually just like throw the PDFs through it.
Right.
Now they can just attach it, so you don't even know it's a turn it in box. Like
Wow.
you can just turn it into like a Canvas assignment or
Mhm.
Bright Space, and like it'll run it then. Yeah,
Yes.
don't plagiarize it. Don't.
Ding,
Yes.
you fail.
Yeah.
See, that's the stuff that we didn't have back then. I mean, we're talking 10 years ago, which is in the realm of technology, it's really not that far
No,
away.
yeah.
But back then, like you said, I had to, when I wrote my paper, I finished writing it, and then I used to do it before
Mhm.
I submitted the actual paper to the class. So then it was like a separate process. And then I would see, oh, your paper is like 80% original or 85.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, great. Then this passes the sniff test, because you're still going to run into issues where you're not plagiarizing.
Where I'm citing a
Or,
work and it's
yeah,
included in there as a
exactly.
Yeah.
substantiating piece
Yes.
of my paper. Like, here's my opinion, and here's the thing that agrees with me from X. So solidifying my argument,
Yeah.
but it can't be 90% of your paper.
Right. Yeah, I remember that was the threshold for my university. Was like, it has to be above 85%. So as long as it's 85%, you're fine. And like you said, I forget, but it was probably 92, 95% most of my papers, and that 5 to 8% was just the citations and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And
Mhm.
let's moving on. How might the integration of AI tools influence the role of teachers in the classroom? Do you think this will enhance or diminish their effectiveness?
As it stands right now, I think it's diminishing their effectiveness right now. But I think for the future, that's going to change because AI is just only going to get better. Like this Chat GPT stuff, there's going to be more things than just Chat GPT. There already are that are really good at doing this stuff. And we're going to have to get away from the multiple choice tests and like the short answers. Eventually, we're just going to have to get to doing more creative things.
Right.
And the classroom is going to be probably in the future mostly projects. Instead of having all these homework assignments, you probably will just have group projects for most of it, doing more creative stuff that won't have to rely on the AI more. With how school is right now, with how tests are and school from home, stuff like that, it's kind of diminished the teacher's role because, like in math classes, even before AI, a lot of these online calculators started popping up to do most of the math for you.
Yeah.
Like that's already been a thing. And now English classes and stuff like that is getting affected by the AI writing. It's going to have to change. I think it's going to change for the better. I think these are positive changes that are going to make teachers better teachers in the future. But we're going to have to start changing now while AI is not in its great state. Because if we try to keep doing what we're doing, Like school's just going to be full of kids using AI, teachers using AI checkers, new AI comes out that beats the AI checkers, and then you just have a constant battle between the students and the teachers. So something does need to change.
I will say, for anybody that cringed when Adam said group projects, when you get out of school and you get into the workforce, guess what's waiting for you?
Bigger.
Unless you are like a solo researcher, it's going to be a series of group projects. Now, the good news is if someone's not pulling their weight, they don't get the same grade you get. They don't get raises. They don't get to keep their jobs. So they're highly incentivized to pull their weight and do their part of the group project. But learn to manage group projects, learn to work in a group, because that's what working is.
I think an interesting point, though, is back to kind of like the math and English point. I think teachers can still have a really good assessment of that. I mean, if you hand a kid a basic calculator and a pencil and a paper and say, here, do this math, whatever they learn with AI and whatever sources are kind of like out the window. Like it's just dumb in the paper. So it's like you're still going to be able to assess what the kid knows. And then same thing for English. Like most of the stuff that I did in high school within these, like you get not even a graphic calculator, basic calculator. But for English, like you're handwriting essays like consistently. You probably write like 16 a year, maybe more. And it's like that really throws AI out the window because it's like you're not using your phone, you're not using the AI sources. So I think teachers are still very valuable in that space. I think as students become more advanced, there's kind of like that perspective, like, oh, like they should be changing with the times. But you gotta think like that's very, very confusing for them. They've been doing this the same way for 30 years, and it's complex. Yes, they should use it as a resource, but I don't think they should fully integrate it into classroom yet. I think they need to be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point because Brian and I obviously are older than you guys, but
We forgot to say significantly.
Yeah. Listen, let's not go there. But you bring up a good point about writing essays basically by hand because we used to do that.
Yeah, I was like, how else would you write an essay?
Exactly. And so I came in, getting out of high school into college when these things, computers, were just starting to become more effective, that they were really the thing now that you could take with you anywhere and write. But before then, it was just basically all manual. So what you just said right now kind of brought an idea. It's like, why aren't we going back? Because with AI and all these different tools that kids are going to have access to, it is smart to go back to the old ways of, okay, here's 3 pieces of paper. I need you to make X amount of words on this topic. And here's 3 books that you can read up on this topic. Or maybe, hey, use your laptop, read up on the topic, but the write-up is all by hand. You have to shut down, etc. Like print paper, whatever you want to do, and then just write. And that, I think, is a solution, a probable solution to this issue with teachers and students maybe writing paper on computer and just using these tools to alternatively get them some answer, right?
I have a senior and a freshman in high school this year. And one of the things that I've tried to explain to them is being able to tell me what somebody else did, what somebody else said, what somebody else thought about something. That's step one. Taking it and then being able to relate to me what that means to you or what you think about or how you interpret their opinion or what they did. That's where the education part really comes in. That's where you show that you're able to absorb material, consider it, and then react or respond to it. Like regurgitating other people's stuff is fine, but it will only get you so far. You have to be able to have original thoughts about things that other people have done or said. And that's where perfecting that part of it is what will propel you into your higher education, your career, the rest of your life.
Yeah, critical thinking is very critical. So keeping with the topic of teachers and educators, what ethical considerations should educators keep in mind when implementing AI technologies in the classroom?
Well, I think kind of one of interesting perspective on AI as for students' perspective is like, oh, like they're cheating or they're lazy. Educators can do the same thing. There's a lot of things that like their whole lesson plan they could throw through AI, and like there's some classes where you can tell where they just got a lot of help. And sometimes they're new professors and you feel for them, they're trying to get their reins, but it's important that they still have kind of like that backbone of what the profession is. There's just a lot of times where you can tell the lesson's a little rushed. I really like discussion-based classes. I don't like a lecture as much. I mean, they could throw words into a presentation and they can shoot out a PowerPoint and they can just present that the entire class.
Mhm.
So it's really easy from a educator standpoint to be super lazy nowadays. So I think they also have to put the effort in.
That's a great point. The professor or the TA or anybody, they can tell when a student has kind of leaned a little too heavily on the AI crutch. But at the same time, students in the classroom can tell if the professor or the presenter has done that same thing.
Speaking on that professor laziness, I have seen a lot of my professors reuse work from other teachers in other schools. Word for word documents, just take it and then slap their school's logo on top of it. From assignments that are 8, 10 years old, the exact same questions, word for word, number for number, and they would put them in. That was before the AI stuff. I knew a lot of teachers who do that, especially it was mostly college professors. I know a lot of college professors who their main job at college was to do research.
Right.
That's normally what they get paid for, and the schooling is second for them. So sometimes I do see them take like Ethan said, you can definitely tell, but they were doing that way before the AI stuff, and I do wonder if the AI stuff is going to make it worse. I've never really had a professor where I felt like their classroom was generated through AI. I've never really felt that way, but I have felt that some professors do the exact same thing that other professors do, and they just kind of essentially copy and paste what other professors do sometimes. And I've seen it with the assignments. I would be interested to see if how AI would do that. Would it make it better? Technically, because if a lot of teachers are doing that, which I've seen, would it technically make the professors better because they're making a more personalized lesson plan for multiple professors instead of just taking the exact same assignments and giving them to the students years later?
They say you're an expert in something when you can teach it to people. I don't think you're an expert in something if you're teaching someone else's work to people. Might be harsh to say, but I think if you have an original lesson plan and original thought, and these are your ideas and you're teaching to students, that's great. And I think you can use AI as a tool then. But I think it's hard to, I don't want to call any or generalize professors as lazy, but just any professor that's taking shortcuts. I think for them taking AI, that might just become too much. I think if the professor is a great professor, which many of them are, and they just want to take this extra thing to optimize, like I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and you talk about these tools. I mean, Copilot can basically create a PowerPoint for you now and kind of create that basically the whole plan for the school year. Throw it together in a PowerPoint, you get 100 slides, and then you go 10 slides per class, and boom, you're done.
Yeah.
And that initial input of information, again, like I was saying with my kids, that's step one. Anybody can do that. Once it synthesizes it, kicks out that, then what are you doing to then further craft it? And if the answer is nothing, then why are you there? You are unnecessary.
So we talked a little bit about assessments and maybe going back to old assessments, but how can AI-driven assessments provide more accurate evaluations of student progress compared to traditional methods?
It's a tough one. Might be touch and go. It's like there's probably certain assessments that are a lot better if they're kind of handwritten. But I mean, AI could be a good judge for certain things. It's like I'm not really familiar with AI assessments, like in doing them myself. I'm familiar with what they look like. I feel a lot of them are multiple choice, not really open-ended, discussion based, which most American education system is multiple choice. So I don't think it'd be too foreign. It sounds very scary when you say it like that, but I don't think it's too different from what we're currently doing. I just think it's not as organic. I think it's a temporary fix, and that could be kind of the pop quiz section of the class. But I do think that the discussion based is just way too valuable. You need to get like that opinion. You need to figure out what everyone else is thinking, and then kind of articulate it within yourself, and then have an original thought. Picking one answer and just like, okay, like that one's good. Like I've never really been a fan of that.
I'm not too familiar with the AI assessments, but I think I agree with Ethan. I think could give you some sort of insight, but I don't know if it would tell you the whole story really about students. It just maybe in the future it could get to that point, but all in all, right now I don't really see that being too valuable.
When you think about the current system that we use, you talk about multiple choice questions, etc., taking away the discussion piece, like I'm sure you could probably feed AI the answers to a test of multiple choice and say, okay, I need you to grade these for all, and boom, done. Like as a professor, okay, great. This is exactly what I need. I didn't need to go through it. I'm sure you could also feed it any discussion-based exams or papers and just say, can you grade these on XYZ? And basically what you're looking for as a professor.
Yeah.
So kind of thinking about the structure and
loading in keywords.
Right, loading in keywords, etc. So I'm sure that AI could do some of that. But I think going back to something we talked at the beginning, it probably is going to miss some of that nuance and some of that human thing that we are basically trained to do, because we're looking at things from a different perspective. Is this something I would have written, or is this something I would have said if I was discussing this with the students?
And even without the words, you know, you have the way they present it, charisma, mannerisms, how they convey it, how there's other students and peers, you know, really taking that information. You have all these other perspectives, and just like 80% of like communication is, you know, nonverbal.
Right.
And you're gonna grade, you know, the 20%, and that's 100% of their grade. I don't think that should ever be a thing.
Right.
But back to what I said about kind of like the pop quizzes, is like just thinking about it, like that could be a really good thing if they have the slides and it's like, hey, make a 5-question pop quiz. And that's like the start of the class. It's like, okay, last lecture we did this. Like I could see that being a good assessment. I don't think that should be a final, but I think that should be like a really good kind of like a pace holder, you know?
Yeah, and if that's freeing up the professor or the TA's time,
Yeah.
like, because that's almost busy work for them. Like this is just a little 5-question bang. Were you paying attention last class? Have those generated, sure, and then you can focus more on projects or the final, or how like the more in-depth proof that you've been paying attention, absorbing, synthesizing, and processing the information presented in the class in other ways. You don't have to waste time with those little quick touch-ins if those are auto-generated. I can totally see that.
All right, so here's our next question. What are the potential challenges schools may face in adopting AI solutions, particularly in terms of resource allocation and training?
That's a good one. It's a tough one. I think this has to go to department by department. There's just certain things where it might be hard to integrate AI, like thinking right now, like a library system, like might be great, you know, figuring out like new sorting methods. But you might have the same librarian that's been there for 30 years that knows where everything is, and that might really take her off, you know? So I think you kind of got to, you know, play by ear. It might be really good in departments where it's not like math, where that could really throw something, you know, off.
I laughed because my mom was a librarian when I was growing up, and she was a librarian when we started moving away from the Dewey Decimal System into the Library of Congress catalog system, which is a better, far superior system. But the transition was still a major pain.
So,
and I mean, with AI, like department by department, I mean, you still have to train it. So like what is going to be important for the telecommunications or speech department is going to be very different than business and accounting. So
I think there are some departments who probably shouldn't utilize it. Like I would say, I don't really see a point in like an art thing, like a theater or like art classes, drawing classes, or things like that. But I can definitely see it being used for some things like engineering classes, for example. I can definitely see that being something that is very helpful in putting those together. Again, you don't want to just use the AI assessments. You want the professors to help take that next step, obviously. But that's something that I did in high school. I took the Project Lead the Way, their engineering classes for high school, and having an AI tool being used to help with everything would have been so helpful throughout that, not just for me, but for the professors, definitely. Because I've had some professors who, some of the stuff that we did, we all struggled on some of it, on trying to get technology to work sometimes, and some lessons plans went awry and things like that. So it's definitely important, and I definitely think that there should be a transition into that eventually, but it again, that transition, like Brian said, is probably going to be difficult, especially for like my professor in my high school has been doing that for 35 years when I went there. And that's going to be something, even though he's very up to date on technology, that's going to be something that's very difficult for him to get over. So it is going to be a struggle, but I think it is important that we start moving forward on.
Yeah.
So I had a thought on the lesson plan where everything goes wrong and nothing's cooperating.
Mhm.
I mean, that can, with hindsight, be one of the most valuable days you had in a classroom, because you're going to be somewhere in the future when, like, oh, today's that day. Absolutely nothing works. Nothing is doing what it's supposed to do. How do I get this figured out? And how do I get it to a state where we can actually make it work? And like experiencing that in a classroom setting, which is fairly safe, there's like very low consequence in there, but figuring out like, okay, I have to stay calm. I got to run through like, what can I try? What should I try?
Mhm.
Okay, I'm all out of those. What else can I try? What can I literally think of that hasn't been tried yet? Now it works, or it's still not working, and we have to figure something else out, because you're going to have a day like that at some point. So to experience that in a classroom, organically would be great, because I don't know really how you would set up a lesson plan to be like, okay, this is the fail. Today is fail day where nothing works, and how does everybody handle it? That would be hard to synthesize, I think.
Yeah, but great to sit and watch.
Yeah.
So let's talk about AI at its current state. How powerful is AI at its current state? Do you guys think it would be able to pass high school?
Certain high schools.
Which high school?
Yeah, definitely certain high schools, but also I think it really depends on how observant your teachers are and how willing they are to let you utilize these tools. I think there's some teachers in some classes where it's just not going to fly, that the current work that AI does isn't human enough. Put it at that. Could you graduate? Probably.
Well, we talked about it
Yeah,
being
yeah.
average paper.
C-
so,
paper.
yeah.
You're kind of just banking on it going through and getting a grade. Sometimes that might bounce like an email and you might fail. So I wouldn't say it's worth it. I would say as a tool though, for sure. You don't have to be that smart of a person to utilize that and to actually learn from it. It can be a great resource.
Mhm.
But on its own, I don't think it's at that point yet. I hope not. If it is, then the school failed.
I feel like if somebody was like of a background where they're just like they're a different style of learner than processing things through AI to get it in a state that they absorb it more readily.
Oh, yeah.
That could be an excellent use of the tool.
Yeah.
I definitely think that it could get a high school diploma. There are some classes where I think AI would not have like I think math, for example, if you put in any math equation, most of the time it'll probably give you the right answer. There's AI tools that will. For stuff like English, writing papers,
Right.
it's going to give you C's, D's, and F's, and you might not pass some classes. And there's some specialty classes, things like chemistry and stuff like that might be a little bit more difficult for AI, especially if you take AP classes, things like that. But if you take the most basic level classes, trying to get the minimum requirements to graduate, it seems like it's pretty close. I think there's some classes that it wouldn't pass and you wouldn't get that diploma because you didn't pass them. But I do think it is dangerously close to being that way just because of how school's set up right now. Lots of multiple choice tests. It gives AI options to go and look for from everywhere else in the world. And so things might have to be moving away from that potentially. But again, I believe it's a lot closer to doing something like that than people think it is.
But what if you were paying for the premium version of ChatGPT?
Oh, there you go. All A's.
It also takes, little intuition within that. Like you could have the best tool, but you still have to know how to swing it. Could that write you good papers? Could it do whatever? 100%. But you still have to be able to like put the prompt in. Like there's jobs that are prompt engineering, and it's a lot of, it's getting really, really critical. But I think when you were talking about how, there's students that, kind of like coast by with it, I mean, I think there's B students that'll coach by with C's, because AI, because like, oh, it's just easy.
Mhm.
And it's like if they applied themselves, they'd probably get B's. But with AI, they're like, oh, perfectly fine with getting C's or D's. So I think that's kind of, or I know A students that just slack off and use AI, get B's and C's. You can use it, you can graduate, but
How
how well are
how
you going to
well are
graduate?
you
Yeah,
gonna
And you have to be willing to accept the results
yeah,
of
Yeah.
that. Like that's going to affect
yeah,
your life in a very significant way.
yeah,
If you spend your life skating by, you can probably do fine. You have a fine life.
yeah,
But if you compare it to the life you could have had you learned to apply yourself and to and to work for things, it's just gonna be better.
right.
So it's just like, what are you willing to accept for yourself
Yeah.
on your behalf?
Yeah.
And you really should be your own champion, your own advocate, and you should try to get the best for yourself that you can get.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the dad in me coming out.
Yes.
No, it's all right though. It's good.
So before we go, you guys obviously are AI users. Obviously we've talked about this here. Any advice to students who might be starting college and might have questions about how to use AI in college?
Yeah, so something we mentioned earlier, if you have a paper and you need to write it, just spend the extra 30 minutes to an hour. Like you could shoot the paper through, read it in AI and go, okay, like that's good. But like actually write it yourself. Don't just send it through. You don't want to start college with an F or a reputation and a bad one with a teacher or a professor. Part of college that some people don't realize is one of the best things is just having a good relationship with your professor. It makes going to class pretty good, makes it more fun. I think that's really valuable, and having that relationship, they can do a lot for you. You don't want to mess that up day one. You can use it as a resource, but just don't rely on it. You're a smart kid, you made it to college. Don't give up. Just use it as a resource. Please do not use it as your backbone. Even if it's a premium version and you think it's going to coast through, you will get into a job and it'll humble you if you use it like that.
Yeah, exactly. If I was telling you how to use AI in college, it would just be research. Use it to compile ideas so you can write your paper.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the best. It's a really great tool for doing that. It combines a lot of information and then you can write your own thing. It's very good for doing stuff like that. But again, if you want to get C's in college and you really want to be lazy, you wouldn't even do it because teachers can check for that plagiarism stuff and they will fail you. There are teachers who are looking, they will be happy if they look and see this paper was 100% AI generated. They will send you an email saying that they're kicking you out of the class and they're failing you.
And you will be the best part of their day.
Like you don't know what teachers are checking for that stuff. Even if you say, oh, I'm going to put it through multiple AI things, no, you're not going to get past that. That their technology is evolving right next to your technology. So you never know about stuff like that. It's not really worth it to do any of that. You lose a lot of that thinking, that critical thinking, that next step. You lose a lot of that in college because in college you're going to be given a lot of projects and assignments that are really you're going to need that critical thinking. And if you're taking a back seat and you're just being lazy on the few times with assignments that you can use that, especially early on in college when you're taking a lot of gen eds and a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily go into your major, that's where you can use that stuff. That's where you can learn those things. You don't want to I get that you want to have more time in college. You're in college. You want to have fun. Again, it's not worth the extra hour that you would get back just from turning in that assignment for all the risks that are associated with it right
I
now.
would say another good point. It really depends on your major. I'm a business major, so I don't really have labs like science and engineers do. But at Purdue, those labs are very intensive. And if you're a student that relies heavily on AI in your other classes, you cannot be reliant on it in that class. And those classes are really going to knock you into shape.
You're going to get lost.
Yes. You don't want to set a precedent of, oh, I'm going to coast, and then you get hit in the mouth, by a class like that. So I would just say, depending on what major you're doing, just become friends, go to class. I would say the best companion you're going to have in college is not going to be AI. It's going to be your classmates, and you're going to be able to learn and cohesively with them. I think that's the best resource you can have, and you can be a resource to them as well. And I don't think AI is ever really going to beat that human connection.
Yeah, there you go. Solid advice.
All right, I have two related non-AI questions.
Okay.
This is nuts and bolts.
Okay.
All right.
How did you guys find your internship? And do you have tips for college students on how to find an internship?
I knew some people.
Hey, Mr. Lowder. Okay.
Yeah.
And I just, I talked to multiple people. I think talking to people, talking to your other classmates about their internships, talking to professors. Professors are always, I know a lot of professors, at least where I went to school, IUPUI, were very helpful in trying to find trying to find internships for you or opportunities. I knew professors who would post into the classroom pages, like in Canvas, just saying, hey, somebody that I know in the industry is looking for interns this summer, and I'm going to give you guys the link to if you want to sign up before anybody else can. Before it goes public, I'm going to let you guys be the first people to put your applications in. I've seen professors do that. They're always willing to help. But again, right now with how internships are, just my biggest advice would just be to apply and just keep applying. Just find more and more businesses, but also try and find places that make sense to what you're doing. Don't just get a internship in something you don't want to do just because it's an internship and you just want job experience.
Right.
If you're running out of time, I can understand it, but especially like you have a bunch of summers in college, you're going to be able to find something. Just keep applying, keep searching. Don't give up. There's plenty of colleges who have, again, talk to your professors, talk to classmates. There's counselors in the school that'll help you. Like there's places in my school, there's places you could go to help write your resume, help do interviews, like mock interview things. My college had plenty of stuff like that. There's plenty of resources out there to help college students find these opportunities, and you really should go and use them.
Yeah. So kind of piggybacking off of that, I knew someone that knew someone. And through that, I was able to make the connection, set up a phone call, really like network and understand that person. And we went through the job postings, and she was like, yeah, like the other ones were more like computer science, back end engineering stuff. And that didn't really seem like me. I'm a business kid from Purdue. And he's like, yo, this one seems, kind of like you, like business analyst intern. I was like, okay, like, so I read about it, applied, and, went through the interview process, and it was great. But I've networked with other companies, and just kind of like knowing that internal connection and just like making that, you almost have to network and put yourself out there. I talked to somebody the other day, and just like, it's almost impossible to just apply to an internship, like not knowing anyone with just your resume and getting it nowadays. He's like, it's almost impossible. Like you almost have to have not like a referral, but you almost have to just kind of like know someone and get your foot in the door. I was like, yeah, I agree with that. And it makes sense though, because it also shows an effort. You're going out your way, you're showing that you care about this company and that you actually want this. Whereas the other kids are just applying to it. So kind of got to balance it out like that. But any advice I would give, kind of like with resume advice and interview advice, is your resume is a living document, constantly update it. There's a lot of different experiences and opportunities you'll have. And a lot of people be like, oh, I update my resume once every semester. And it's like, you should be updating it every week, like you just won that, or you just did that, like put that in your resume, because it can't hurt. You're constantly improving, developing.
Mm-hmm.
And then for interviews, I just do a lot of them, do a ton.
Yeah.
I'll say it. I sucked at interviews. Like when I first started doing them, I would say I'm probably competent now, not even good. I like doing them though, because I can constantly get feedback after the end of it sometimes, or, you can look in the mirror and be like, you know what, like wasn't my best, or like I did really well. And so it's really nice to kind of have that perspective and be like, yeah, the hindsight's always 20/20, and you're like, okay, like this might be why I didn't get it. Maybe I can improve this. And, just there's a lot of opportunities on campus, kind of like you're mentioning, there's a lot of organizations where you're going to get what you put into it, and a lot of kids aren't willing to really put forth too much effort. But if you are, there's a lot of different collaborative spaces where people are just there to help you. I would say just really hammering into that is probably the best advice I could give, just finding that space where you can really develop. And there's a lot of people that just want to see you win, and, you want to see them win as well.
Yeah. Build your network.
Yeah.
When you're in
Mhm.
school, you never know who you're going to meet, who knows somebody else. I did 2 internships when I was in school, and I got both of them through professors. So those relationships with your professors, and it wasn't even like, hey, I heard about this internship. Can you recommend me for it? They came to me. They're like, hey, there's this internship, and I think you're perfect for it. So it was like, it was the absolute best. Like, I just fell into both of them, and they both turned out really great. Like, one was writing for the Bob and Tom show as a comedy writer, and the next one was a paid internship as a writer for an ad agency. And here I am 27 years later, still writing and doing creative things for a living. So those worked out really great. Thank you, Dr. Gerhard. Thank you, Dr. Mishevitz.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Shout outs.
Yeah, shout outs. I like that.
All right. So those are great pieces of advice. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much for joining us on Ask Anything.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask Anything presented by Moser Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to our interns, Ethan Murphy and Adam Lowder, talk to us about AI's effect in the classroom. Join us next time when we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts and what they're currently working on. Remember to send us your ideas or topics via your social media feeds. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.